Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Thanks for joining us on a Monday after a very difficult weekend of news and information. In hour number 3, of course, we'll take your phone calls. We can talk about the strikes in Iran, your thoughts. What are you thinking? All of that coming up in hour number 3. In hour number 2, there's a brand new book out about Larry Bird. That's right. The book is called Heartland, and we'll talk with the author. Thoroughly researched story about Larry Bird and how he came from a small, modest beginning to become one of the greatest basketball players of all time. That's in hour number 2. But in hour number 1, a little bit later on in this hour, we're going to talk about what happened in Iran. But this first half of the first hour, we're going to talk about how it happened. Because if you remember, back on Friday, so many days ago, seems like a month ago, but on Friday, President Trump said that they were going to sever all ties with Anthropic because of the artificial intelligence model. And then hours later, apparently, the U.S. military used Claude, Anthropic's AI model, to help bomb Iran. What exactly does that mean? What exactly is going on? We asked Duncan Cass-Beggs to join us. He is executive director of the Global AI Risks Initiative at the Center for International Governance Intervention. Duncan, welcome to America at Night.
Pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us what happened Friday, and then how did they use artificial intelligence when it came to this attack on Iran? Do we know?
Well, I don't think we know exactly the ins and outs of how the artificial intelligence was used, but bigger picture, AI is becoming a really indispensable aspect of many parts of military interventions and operations, everything from sort of drone use, as we've seen obviously in Ukraine, and to missile defenses and target acquisition, right through to strategy. And clearly every military in the world has got an incentive to adopt AI and figure out how they can use it wisely. And at the same time as they have an incentive to make sure that they are adopting it in ways that are going to be advancing their capabilities and long-term objectives, but while not simultaneously creating new risks for both the military and their populations.
Is it your understanding that Claude was used with the United States attack?
Well, that's generally been the understanding. I don't know if that has been confirmed. We've also heard that Claude was used as part of the Venezuela Maduro operation, and of course the details of that are not publicly available. But it is interesting, as you mentioned, in the context of the sort of debate that we've seen over the last couple of weeks coming to a head in terms of the contract between Anthropic and the Department of War, and that obviously very publicly on Friday being canceled. I think the way of the really simple version of that, as you and your listeners may know, is that a while back there were contracts between the Department of Defense that then became the Department of War and a number of the leading AI companies. In the case of Anthropic, those contracts agreed to a certain usage restrictions about how Claude could be used, and there were two main restrictions. One was that it would not be used for mass surveillance of Americans, and the second would be that it would be not used to control autonomous weapons. As we understand, the Department of War has come back recently and said, we don't want to have those conditions. They essentially limit our freedom to do the government's freedom to do what's needed in their view in defense of Americans. And so and Anthropic said, well, we can't in good conscience give up those conditions. So that kind of led to what could have been sort of just a parting of ways, I suppose, where with the Department of War would no longer rely on Anthropic services. And the president, I believe, tweeted on Friday or put it on social media on Friday that this was going to be the case and there'd be a 6-month transition. What happened after that has made it a little bit more complex is that the Department of War has then since then actually said that it's going to designate Anthropic as actually or Claude and Anthropic's AI systems as constituting a supply chain risk. And that really ups the ante a bit because it means that it could be very difficult for even any other supplier doing business with the Department of War to be involved with Anthropic. So remains to be seen whether that will go through, but that's sort of the state of things, more or less where we are today.
So tonight, the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh is on fire, apparently after drone strikes from Iran. It's not just the U.S. and the capability to have artificial intelligence with their drones. Apparently, the other side has it as well.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that there's really no choice about integrating AI in one way or another into military systems. I mean, I think the same can be said really for all of us, whether it's companies, whether it's individuals. We're all going to need to figure out how are we going to use AI in ways that actually empower us to do and enable us to do what we want to do. And how do we avoid the pitfalls of either adopting AI systems that we can't rely on or that could have, particularly in the case of governments, that could have offsetting negative consequences. And I think in some ways, what this recent example of the debate between the Department of War and Anthropic does is it kind of helps to put into, it really raises some pretty fundamental policy discussions and even public debates that we're needing to be having. But just what are the capabilities that we want companies and governments to have that are suddenly made possible by the AI systems? And I think, if we were to kind of rise above the noise a bit of this current debate, I think it's really worth focusing on is the big picture of what's fundamentally going on now is we're seeing a very, very rapid transformation of AI capabilities, rapid development, and so far that doesn't look like it's going to stop. There are some scenarios where we could maybe see things plateauing and slowing down a bit. I'd certainly, and many others would be relieved if we could catch our breaths and see that for a little while. On the other hand, there are also scenarios where we could be seeing AI systems becoming even more capable and even where you get into sort of a feedback loop where the AI is speeding up the development of AI systems to where we could get what the AI companies themselves are pursuing in terms of these really super intelligent systems. And I think it's worth thinking through in that light. What would it mean? What sort of capabilities would that give to potentially companies in our society or potentially to governments as they are acquiring some of these capabilities? Which of those are capabilities we feel comfortable with? One of the metaphors that's been given is around these really new powerful systems that we could see coming online in the next couple of years, maybe a bit longer, is sort of that idea of a country's worth of geniuses in a data center. Just imagine that you're the CEO of a company and you've got all your employees that work for you, but you've also got a few 100 million, genius level AIs working 24/7, communicating instantaneously with each other, able to do genius level work, whether it's on further technological development, whether it's on military and strategic advice, right through to, of course, if you wanted to deploy that, if you did want to deploy that to surveillance, it would give whoever controlled those kind of systems immense power. And these are powers that we haven't had to deal with individual actors or governments having in the past. And I think now is the time when we need to be having that kind of debate of, what do we do if that comes about? How would we put in the checks and balances to make sure that those kind of capabilities would be used, make sure that they're going to be used in ways that are in the interest of the population and are sort of consistent with our values and laws, of course.
Duncan Cass-Beggs is with us for a couple more minutes. Global AI Risk Initiative. He is the executive director at the Center for International Governance Innovation. You get paid to look at this stuff, study this stuff. You're in the room when these decisions are made. Here's my question about AI, staying in this military space for a minute, and that is it the great equalizer? Iran doesn't have the capabilities we have with our military and our arsenal and our stealth bombers and everything else, but they do have drone technology and they do have AI. Is that an equalizer for some of these lesser countries who aren't as well advanced or equipped with the military hardware?
No, that's a great question. That's one of the big uncertainties we face is like, are we going to see the leaders in the AI technology really pulling far ahead from the others? Or are we going to see this really as an area where, heck, it's just software. It can be, it can be copied. It can be, this could be one that allows a lot of other actors to catch up. And that could be really dangerous if it's, we're thinking of rogue states or non-state actors, terrorist organizations, criminal organizations, and so forth. So far, what we're seeing as the main tendency the last few years is that it really, given the current way that frontier AI is being developed, it requires massive amounts of computing power and energy and data and really top talent. We're seeing in the United States alone, I believe, $650 billion that's going to be expended in capital build-out just over the next year in data centers to make this work. And as long as the really most powerful AI systems require that kind of expenditure, it's probably going to not be an equalizer. It's probably going to be more like an amplifier of the very most capable companies, the really frontier companies, and the countries that have those companies. And that in this case right now, it's really largely just the United States and China. So if that continues, and if we get into one of these feedback loops, then we could really see that pulling away. I think what we look at, and we just put out a report on this called the AI National Security Scenarios, and it's really looking at where could this all go in the coming years, particularly if we start getting these extremely powerful systems. And I mentioned one of the risks there, which is really, one organization, Forethought, has described this as AI-enabled coups. If you're a CEO of a company, or you're a president of a country, or a group of people in the military establishment in the country, if you have control of an AI that's essentially giving you hundreds of millions of geniuses working under your command, that gives you the potential to an unprecedented potential to really that you could exploit for good or to advance your own interests. And I think right now we're seeing that neither at the company's level nor necessarily at government's level we don't have the kind of checks and balances that we would need that would be really robust enough to make sure that kind of power doesn't get abused. But then one of the other scenarios, which I think is one that really sounded like science fiction for many years, but now we're being told by the leading scientists that this could be pretty close. And this is the one where actually we make very powerful systems that then no human can control, that we lose control of, because essentially they're just they think faster than us, they out-strategize us. They know very well how to deceive and manipulate us. We're seeing all of those tendencies now, even in the systems that exist today. Luckily, so far, they're not smart enough. But if we sort of continue on the trajectory that we're headed on now, we could be facing those kind of questions in the coming years. And again, this would be an area where just right now, I think most governments are kind of focusing on what the technology is today, and they're seeing this as a fairly normal technology. But it's on a trajectory where it could become quite different. We are really unprepared, and I think this is something that we need to be. If I had one bit of advice for listeners, I guess it would be just to be asking their companies and their governments. This is really nonpartisan; it applies to all parties. What's your plan? What is the plan to make sure that if AI systems continue on their track now and become incredibly powerful, that we have both the checks and balances to make sure that doesn't get abused, and also the fail-safes to make sure that we don't lose control of those?
Duncan Cass-Beggs, thanks for the great. Thanks for the shot of confidence. Holy mackerel. Things to worry about. Executive Director of Global AI Risks Initiative at the Center for International Governance Intervention, Duncan Cass-Beggs. Duncan, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. It's a worthy challenge. Thanks a lot.
You got it. Stay right there. That's how it happened. But what happened? We're going to talk to a lieutenant general who was our go-to and find out what exactly happened. What does the future hold for this bombing mission? Stay right there. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Stay right there. We're going to talk to NewsNation's senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton. He's been on the show numerous times before. He is our go-to on things like that. The last time he was here, he said, stay close to a news outlet because something is going to happen in the relatively near future. And he was exactly right. He is plugged in, and we'll talk to him coming up in the bottom of the hour. The U.S. is facing increasing military risks to its military forces. It has launched waves of missiles and drone attacks across the region. Iran has been launching waves of military and drone attacks. The U.S. Central Command has said now six service members have been killed so far. The 6 died in drone attacks on a base in Kuwait. That's what we were talking about, AI and drones, because this is a real defense and a real issue for Iran and for the United States. The Wall Street Journal reported separately that 3 American F-15 jets were downed by what appears to be friendly fire over Kuwait. That is one of the most significant losses of equipment for the U.S. in the operation. Bases that house U.S. forces have come under attack in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, just to name a few. The Iranians are attacking across huge swaths of the Middle East. Trying to coordinate an air defense is a challenge for U.S. forces. In addition, they're defending tens of thousands of American troops stationed in the region. The U.S. must also defend dozens of its embassies and other installations. And this evening, we heard that a drone strike has hit the U.S. embassy in Riyadh that is currently on fire. Stay right there. More to get to. Open phones in hour number 3 as well. We'll take your thoughts. Lieutenant General Richard Newton on how it happened, and what happens now. Stay right there. America at Night. Back in a moment.
You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Our next guest is fast becoming our go-to, one of our favorites. He's a highly decorated Air Force officer, 34 years of service. He is NewsNation's senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton. Lieutenant General, welcome back to America at Night.
Hey, McGraw, great to be with you and looking forward to our discussion.
Let's talk about the good. And I think this effort to topple the clerical regime in Tehran, I hope it succeeds widely, because it's a regime that I don't think people realize just how invasive, just how terrible, just how destabilizing it was for the entire Middle Eastern region and for the world. Good riddance. I applaud the Iranian people who were cheering, right? I mean, regardless of what you think about President Trump, this is in one sense, it's a good day for the world that this terrible regime is gone. True or false?
True. I totally agree. I remember when I was at pilot training in Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas, back in 1979. We had about 100 Iranian second lieutenants flying along with me, learning to fly jets. And then their lives were totally disrupted because of the barbaric Islamic revolution that kicked off in March of 1979. Fast forward to 2026, this brutal regime is not quite on the ropes, but they're tumbling. And we have really had an exquisite, stunning military campaign thus far. We've got a long way to go, McGraw, and we can talk about that. But nonetheless, things have started out the gates. We may be a little bit ahead of schedule. The president alluded to that earlier today at the White House, but still a long ways to go. But nonetheless, I believe that this is the right thing to do. And it's one whereby the coming weeks will shape the coming decades, and we need to finish the job. By the way, that's a quote from a dear friend of mine. It's Yoav Gallant, the former Minister of Defense of Israel. But this is indeed a historic moment and an opportunity.
No question that the clerical regime has, in a sense, in one way or another, has been either publicly or behind the scenes holding the world hostage for the last number of decades. Now, but here's the cost, though. The question is, how much is this going to cost? And one of the things the Trump administration has said is that they've said they're for a regime change. In a sense, hasn't he already succeeded? If all the heads of the clerical regime are done, isn't regime change already here? So why do we have to go further? Take me through the strategy to go further. What else more do we have to do?
Oh, first, I would focus on the word change. It hasn't really changed because, however, on hour number one, what I thought was going to take maybe up to 3 or 4 days, you're right. We took out the Ayatollah, his national security advisor, Minister of Defense, their chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and so forth. And so significant leadership upheaval in Iran, in the Islamic regime. However, next man up, much like we saw with Al-Qaeda during the global war on terror. And I was in the Pentagon overseeing global operations on the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. They would send a deputy up, we'd go after him. They'd send the deputy up, and so forth. So in other words, there are leadership vacuums that are filled. There is an organizational plan, I believe, somewhat inside the Islamic Revolution. You've got a variety of elements there that you have to be focused on. Certainly the theocratic regime, yes, but you also have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which really runs the place. They're the second most powerful entity other than the Ayatollah himself. And so the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and their leadership still has to be addressed. About 200,000 IRGC terrorists. They orchestrate stranglehold control on the Iranian people, all 93 million of them, but they are also the ones responsible for exporting terrorism to Hezbollah to the north in Israel, in Lebanon, to Hamas, who's on the ropes now, but to the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Iraqi Shiite militia still. And so we're not out of the woods yet, regarding that overarching objective here. Let me go back to the president's comments, very early Saturday morning, right after this kicked off. The president said what we are trying to do and aiming to do, and we still are to create the conditions for the Iranian people, whom I just mentioned, to reclaim their country. That's really the goal here, and that the term, regime change has a lot of connotations to it, and a little bit maybe perhaps of misperception. But all said, we have clear military objectives. We can go into those here next, but this is going to be a methodical, deliberate, precise, en masse, joint military campaign with the United States, with Israel, and now with some of the Gulf Arab partners who've been attacked also brutally by Iran. So lots to dive into.
So I understand there's got to be a needle that's got to be threaded here. And even though he's alluded to troops on the ground, I don't think anybody realistically thinks he's going to send troops on the ground for any length of time, which is what other experts say has to happen for regime change. But for regime change to come from within, right, you're going to need all sorts of things to happen. Iran is a amalgamation of a number of different minorities sort of held together through this brutal regime. I mean, this could go any number of ways. It could break up into 3 or 4 different regional tribes. And then the other question is, do we want to say in the next group that comes along? So if we leave it to them, are we opening ourselves a door for worse? And or do we want to be involved with it? If you break it, you buy it. Take me through how this works, Lieutenant General.
Yeah. Great questions, great commentary. First and foremost, we don't have the best history in the last several years. You know, we look at Iraq in 2003, then Afghanistan, and so forth. But however, I do not believe that this is Iraq 2.0. I believe this is Iran 2026. And you're right. However, you now have a Iranian population, well educated, very entrepreneur with businesses and so forth. Also have coming out of the shadows, the brutal shadows of this regime for 47 years, and they are appetite to get under the tyrannical regime of the mullahs and this theocracy. I believe is really, the timing is near perfect for that. The other aspect of this, you and I talked about this maybe several days or so ago, McGraw. Iran, the regime itself, is in the worst position leading up to very early Saturday morning I've seen in my professional lifetime. They're in poor shape politically, economically, and militarily. And they don't have a whole lot of friends and allies around them either. So this all comes to the point where, as Yoav Gallant says, this is a moment in time, a moment in history if we stick to the plan. And so that methodical plan that I talked about, first we got to get to the opportunity for the Iranian people to, again, retake their country. And who that leader is, I do not know. I don't think we know. But I do know this, that it's time now, and I believe the Iranian people have a tremendous appetite to get the theocracy, the mullahs, the Islamic henchmen, the IRGC, and Basij militia, as pushed back as we possibly can. Now, I do not anticipate, I'll agree with you, certainly, no boots on the ground. However, to help shape that, there's two. Let me see, how can I go about this? There's two conflicts going on. There's two entities, that are really playing a strong part here. One is the overt military operations that we've seen. 100 combat aircraft, U.S. combat aircraft on the first go, and so forth. And then you've got 1,000 targets hit in the first 24 hours by U.S. and Israeli Air Force and so forth, and going after the leadership, going after the Iranian retaliatory capabilities with ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, and we can dive into that soon, but also going after other aspects of the Iranian capabilities, their command and control and their defenses and so forth. The other aspect of it, though, the Israeli Mossad, their intelligence apparatus, is deeply embedded inside Iran. And in fact, they were key. They were absolutely essential to providing that intelligence. So the Ayatollah and his henchmen were taken out on the first hour or two. That's extraordinary, by the way. Also, you've got other, certainly, I'm sure, U.S. intelligence capabilities there as well. So there's a in the shadows aspect of this that can help shape and provide support to the Iranian people. There is reports up to 6,000 to 7,000 Starlink terminals provided them. And oh, by the way, the current Iranian regime cannot communicate amongst itself. We've taken out their eyes and ears and their communications. We've done that not only with kinetic strikes, but non-kinetic strikes with cyber operations and other electronic warfare capabilities. So there are aspects to how we can lend a hand and support with regard to the Iranian people and allow them to rise up. But at the end of the day, it's really, it sounds trite to say it's up to them, but it's their decision how they want to move forward. Once I believe that we are going to get rid of this, Iranian regime, or certainly cut it back significantly.
NewsNation senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton, our guest for a couple more minutes. Can you explain to me how I keep reading about how we're running low on Tomahawk missiles and or interceptors? How is that possible?
Well, I tell you what, it's been a busy decade, but it comes down to a lot of my colleagues talk about this. Dave Petraeus is a friend and a colleague. We've discussed this before. It's called missile math. Iran has, let's say, 2,000 ballistic missiles, and they've got about 300 launchers or so forth. And that's why we're putting a premium on this military campaign to go after their missile capability, their ballistic missile capability, their cruise missiles, and their drones. And I want to get back to that here after I make this commentary, because I've got three main points I want to make on that. there's also, a zero-sum game here with regard to the defensive aspects of this, that being either the Israeli Arrow system or the United States THAAD, as well as our Patriot missile systems that are in Israel, but also throughout the Gulf region, as well as the Aegis cruisers, the missile programs or missile capabilities, defense missile capabilities that we have at sea, particularly with the Forward Carrier Strike Group. So it comes down to, yes, there's not an ever-ending, style of these munitions and capabilities. And so, right, we run out, I don't believe it, but Admiral Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, is very judicious but very exacting in terms of his use of air defense capabilities, as well as the Israelis are as well. The other aspect of this is that we referred to Tomahawk cruise missiles, an extraordinary weapon system, and been used, and our capabilities are extraordinary, but the stockpiles of these munitions are not unlimited. And I guarantee you, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and especially, as I mentioned, Admiral Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, is well aware of that. We have effective planning capabilities. We have exquisite battle damage assessment. We also have extraordinary defensive radars and so forth to understand what's happening there with regard to our stockpile versus the threat. I'm going to let you come back with me on that one, but I do want to go over some of that, a little bit more details of what I refer to as this missile math and where we are right now at the moment in terms of those numbers.
Yeah, I got about 3 minutes left, and then I'm gonna have to let you go. And you mentioned Iran has a whole bunch of launchers. Do they have more launchers than we have interceptors? And it's a race to see if we can knock out their launchers before we run out of interceptors?
It's not a race. It's the fact that we've achieved air superiority, which was nearly job one after taking over taking down the leadership. That's why we achieved air superiority to be able to do that. After 48 hours. I understand that the Iranian basic, ballistic missile attack capabilities of their inventory of ballistic missiles, not only their missiles but their launchers, had been reduced by 50%. That's what my sources tell me. The other aspect of this is Iran's their ballistic missile penetration capability. If you look at the numbers back in April of last year, remember they were lobbing those ballistic missiles, their short range, their long range. Their penetration, their ability to strike was about 20%. We got better. And then in June, if you remember the Israeli air campaign culminating with the B-2 strikes on June 22nd with Midnight Hammer, their penetration rate was down about 14%. Now, I understand the latest numbers. This can change. It's now down to 10% in terms of the penetration rate. That's is certainly in our favor if you want to go back to those zero-sum numbers we're talking about. The other aspect of this is Iran is also running out of bullets. They got not only to worry about attacking Israel, but also the Gulf Arab nations now that they've taken on, which is a strategic mistake on their part. But we anticipated in their planning factors, and our planning factors are that they would lob about 25 to 50 missiles in a salvo, McGraw. They're only able to do now in just 2 to 5 missiles in a salvo. I was doing an interview with the Jerusalem Post earlier today, and I asked the lead editorial writer there, compare what you're going through right now with what you're going through last summer. Much less robust. Now that's just a qualitative aspect of her insights there. But again, I think we're on course, we're on track here. But this missile math is a difficult one, but it's not one that I don't believe we will be able to overcome this, I believe.
I got about a minute and a half left, and I just want to end with what you said about the other Arab states. Iran is bombing the other Arab states. That can only lead to hostilities in the region where the unbelievable, where Iran might do the impossible, which is solidify the Arab world with America against Iran.
Absolutely. The Gulf states are angry. The fact is that there's a Wall Street Journal piece that's very interesting. I'd have our listeners take a look at it. But Iran has actually expanded the United States, or really President Trump's war coalition. You think of Israel, you think of the United States, absolutely. But now you've got United Arab Emirates, you've got Qatar, you've got Bahrain, you've got Kuwait, you've got Saudi Arabia, and on and on and on. And so most of those Gulf Arab allies and friends of ours have been touched by Iranian ballistic missiles. They're terrorizing, the region, not only just the United States and Israel. And so really the end game here, McGraw, I believe, certainly is create the conditions for the regime to collapse and for the Iranian people to reclaim their nation. I've already said that. But I believe also at the end of the day, if we can get the Abraham Accords back on track, and you can perhaps get Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations to sign up and recognize Israel, you have changed the course of Mideast history for decades. That, to me, is the geopolitical objective here. And what we're doing today, what we're going to be doing tomorrow in the coming weeks, I believe will lead up for the conditions to make that happen.
We'll have to leave it there. NewsNation senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton. Lieutenant General, keep your cell phone on. We will reserve the right to call you at any moment. Thanks for checking in.
Thank you, McGraw. Best wishes.
You got it. America at Night, back in a moment.
From the heart of America, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
A story that just moved on the wallstreetjournal.com website. A critical variable in this war is whether these monarchies start running out of interceptors before the Iranian regime runs out of projectiles. At current burn rates, it could be very soon. That from the Wall Street Journal. These interceptors and these Tomahawk cruise missiles, that is a story to watch in all of this. I don't think a lot of people are talking about it, but our last guest mentioned it, and worth noting. Stay right there. When we come back in hour number 2, we're going to leave the war for just a moment. We'll talk about it and take phone calls in the third hour. But next hour, we're going to talk to Keith O'Brien, who has written a book about Larry Bird, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird, because it almost didn't happen. If you remember, he went to Indiana, went back home, never to return to college again. The unbelievable story of Larry Bird. The book is called Heartland, and we'll talk about it next hour with the author. It drops, I think, today or tomorrow. So we're getting it hot off the presses. Stay right there. America at Night. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
All right, this hour we're going to talk a little Larry Bird for you. Larry Bird, what a mystery when it's all said and done. The man really never leaves Indiana. He's at home, just being down home Larry. He has not settled in the fame and fortune like so many other NBA stars have done over the years. And to give you a sense of Larry Bird and where the NBA was and where it is today, in the 78 draft, he was drafted by the Boston Celtics and decided to return for his senior year at Indiana State. Now, the Celtics retained his rights through that year. And at the end of the year, when he lost that famous NCAA championship game against Michigan State's, or I should say Magic Johnson's Michigan State Spartans, he was supposed to sign with the Boston Celtics. Ultimately, he, said, hey, if I don't get the money, I'm going back to the NBA draft. Well, they finally paid him, and it was the largest rookie contract in the history of the NBA. You ready for this? In 1979, the Boston Celtics, a record 5-year, $3.2 million. 5-year, $3.2 million for Larry Bird for his rookie contract. By the way, to put that into some historical context, the highest paid player in the NBA today is Steph Curry. Do you know how much money Steph Curry makes in a year? $59 million. Larry Bird signed a 5-year, $3.25 million contract and that was a record at the time. Highest paid rookie in the history of sports. And Steph Curry makes $59 million. The book is called Heartland. The author is Keith O'Brien. He has written Charlie Hustle and Fly Girls, New York Times bestselling books. The book is A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and The Miracle of Larry. We're getting Keith O'Brien on the phone right now so we get a chance to talk with him. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll do 2 segments with him. We'll come back and talk with him in a moment. Back in a moment, America at Night.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Just in time for March Madness. The book comes out tomorrow from New York Times bestselling author of Charlie Hustle and Fly Girls. His latest project is called Heartland, The Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. Keith O'Brien joins us on America at Night. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
You betcha. Let's get right into it. The book, I can't put it down. It's a riveting account, and it's the story of how the Indiana State, Michigan State NCAA championship game came to be, really, in a sense.
Well, right. I feel like, we've been telling the Larry Bird story the wrong way over the years. Every time someone tells this story, they end up doing the Bird magic thing. And I get why people do that. Obviously, Bird and Magic play against each other in that epic championship game in March 1979. And they will, of course, redefine, and save the NBA in the 1980s. But, they don't know each other in the 1970s. They're not friends. They're not rivals. They're not anything. And it's, what I've tried to do here with this book is really just tilt the camera a different way and, come at it from a different perspective and tell the story of the rise of Larry Bird in rural Indiana in the 1970s with the cast of characters who were around him. And, these people will shape, change, and it sometimes save Larry Bird.
It starts with, as I was reading the book, I couldn't help but keep coming back to the fact that Larry Bird was raised in a very difficult household, had lots of trauma in his youth, lots of troubles, lots of issues, very similar to an African-American who's raised in the inner city who makes greatness. He just happened to do it on the farm in rural Indiana.
Well, I think that word that you used is accurate and insightful. It I think at times was a traumatic childhood. No one used that word in the 1970s, certainly not in French Lick, certainly not in rural Indiana, certainly not with Larry, but I think it was. It was a traumatic childhood at times. And I think really when you look at it the way I have, it's sort of a miracle that we ever know his name. He comes from this rural community. Folks who haven't looked at it on the map should. I mean, French Lick is a remote location in southwest Indiana. In the 1970s, French Lick and West Baden, these two towns where he grows up, are quite poor. Orange County, the county where he grows up, is the second poorest county in Indiana. Indiana at the time is one of the poorest states in the country. And, the Birds feel that at home. Larry's father feels that. Larry's father struggles a lot. And, Larry has to shoulder a lot of that alone.
He's the younger brother. His older brothers drag him to the basketball court. There's nothing else to do. They want to get away from the house, so they end up going to the basketball court. How does it all start?
Well, I mean, in Indiana today and Indiana in the 70s, kids like to play basketball. In the part of Indiana where Larry grew up, there were basketball courts in town, indoors and outdoors. The kids' fathers would put up, ramshackle hoops, homemade backboards on telephone poles in the yard. I have been to the place which may have been one of the first places where Larry Bird ever shot a basketball. It's not a court. It's not a gym. It was a little water plant in West Baden. West Baden and French Lick are basically two little towns that are attached to each other on State Road 56 in Orange County. And at this water plant, there was one of those ramshackle hoops. And it was just down the hill from where Larry and his older brothers grew up. And I do think it does matter that, Larry had two older brothers. He learns from having to play with them that he's got to scrape and claw and fight, to just be in the game, to just be picked on a team. And, one of Larry's brothers, Mark Bird, was a great player himself. He was considered in the 1970s to be the best shooter that anyone had ever seen from 15 foot and in. And, in these years, Larry isn't dreaming about playing college basketball. He's not dreaming of playing in the NBA. He's not thinking about that at all. All he wants to do is be like his older brother, Mark, and maybe one day make the varsity team at Springs Valley High School in French Lick.
That's really unbelievable. How good?
It's crazy, right?
How good of a basketball player in high school was he? Obviously, he was good enough to go to Indiana, right? But I mean, how good was he, and what type of a recruit was he for Bobby Knight's Indiana team going into that season?
So for the first 3 years of Larry Bird's high school career, he is not even considered the best player on his own team. He's a role player. Even in his junior year, he is not scoring the most. He's a facilitator. And at the time, Larry Bird wasn't that big. He was about 6'3". So, he's a guard, at best. But in between his junior year and his senior year of high school, something happens that's frankly going to change basketball history and American sports history. Larry Bird's going to grow about 3 or 4 inches. It's an absurd growth spurt, but it absolutely happened. I spoke to recruiters, college coaches, his teammates, his classmates. People saw it. In fact, one of his classmates told me that Larry Bird grew so fast in this time frame that his mother couldn't keep up with it. And, he's outgrowing his wardrobe, and the Birds didn't have extra money for new clothes. And so she had to go to a fabric store, essentially, and sew onto the bottom of Larry's pants extensions so that the pants went to the floor. And classmates at Springs Valley High School recalled that, they didn't match the extension with the pants, but nobody said anything because by the fall of 1973, it is clear that Larry Bird might just be a great basketball player. But in the state of Indiana, nobody cares about what's happening in Orange County. In voting that year, another thing that will blow people's minds, in the voting for players of the year and all-stars, et cetera, Larry Bird is not considered a top 15 player in the state of Indiana. And you did hear that right. 15 players were considered better than Larry Bird.
So how does Bobby Knight then get him recruited? I mean, what if Bobby Knight sees something somebody told him? How did that happen?
So there was a man named Dave Bliss who worked on Bobby Knight's staff. And Bliss had first seen Bird play during his junior year when he was still only 6'3". And Bliss saw something in him. He believed that Bird was much better than people knew. And, with that growth spurt, of course, people are now taking an interest. Bird's scoring at an absurd rate against other small rural schools in the winter of 73, 74. Dave Bliss is no longer the only one who's there. Louisville is there. University of Cincinnati is there. Miami of Ohio is there. Purdue is there. At times, Joe B. Hall from University of Kentucky was there. But by the spring of 74, Joe B. Hall bails out. He doesn't think that Bird is fast enough, strong enough to play for Kentucky. And, Knight signs him, but he's not over the moon about Larry Bird. Dave Bliss might have been, but it's not clear that Bobby Knight was. And what is clear is that Knight doesn't know Bird. He doesn't understand him. He doesn't know what Bird needs. And so, while Bird, enrolls at Indiana at Bloomington in August 1974, it's not going to go well. And, within weeks, 3 weeks, Larry Bird leaves Indiana and hitchhikes home to French Lick.
He doesn't even make it to the first basketball practice, does he?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't even make it through essentially the first 2 weeks of school. I pinpointed through my reporting the exact day that Larry Bird leaves Bloomington. It's a Friday. It's Friday, September 13th, 1974. He has been on campus for roughly 21 days. They've been in school for all of 2 weeks. And, he walks into Dave Bliss's office and he says he's leaving. And, I did a lot of reporting around that. Why would he leave? Bird himself, has talked about that in the last couple of decades. He didn't have money. He felt poor. The campus was too large. And to be clear, the campus in Bloomington was, 15 times the size of French Lick. But another thing is happening too. That's a really good Hoosier team. Without Larry Bird, without him in the next 2 years, they're going to go on and lose one game, one in 2 years. They've got 4 future NBA stars in that locker room without Larry Bird. They've got a future number 1 draft pick in that locker room without Larry Bird. And so nobody really cares that he's there. And actually, in my reporting, I unearthed a scene that happens in the locker room in that last pickup game that Bird plays. He's angry in that locker room, because it seems that they weren't passing during that game, or they weren't including him in that game, and he complains about it. And, one person I spoke to recalled specifically that while he was complaining, another guy in the locker room said, "Tell us again, Larry, where are you from?" And the point was clear. Larry was from nowhere. He was a nobody from nowhere, and Larry Bird leaves and hitchhikes home.
The book is called Heartland. Keith O'Brien is the author. Just dropped A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. He was also off the court. Was he not just painfully shy?
There were sort of two sides of Larry, and there are still today. On the one hand, he was a very private person, and he did not want to talk to the press when he gets to Indiana State in the fall of 1976. And finally he was able to play there. He doesn't want to deal with that. But there was another side to him, a side that the kids saw. And this side was, sarcastic, incredibly confident, believed in himself and his basketball abilities at all times. And so there are these sort of two versions of himself. But the version that he presents to the public is the one that doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to be quoted, doesn't want to be seen, and definitely does not want to be talking, about his personal life.
Keith O'Brien is our guest. He did not talk to you for this book. Is that correct? You tried, but he wouldn't talk?
He did not.
That is some serious. That's a heck of a writer for being able to write the book and not talk to the guy.
Well, one thing I've learned over the years, through this book and past books, is that while it's always great to talk to the subject at the center of the story, and I absolutely did want to talk to Larry Bird here, you can often get just as accurate, if not more accurate, portrait by talking to 10, 12, 25, 100 people around that person. And that's what I believe I did here. And to be clear, this book, Heartland, is bigger than just a Larry Bird story. It's a story of a team, a time, a place, and a moment where everything changes.
We're going to get to more of that. Keith O'Brien is our guest. The book is Heartland, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. Out today. America at Night. Back in a moment.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Join the nightly conversation, America at Night, with McGraw Milhaven.
Heartland is the book. Keith O'Brien is the author. It's the story of Larry Bird. But, Keith, it's not just the story of Larry Bird, and I love what you did, right? Larry Bird is such a gigantic story. You just took a part of his life up and through the NCAA championship game, and you sort of focused on that. Just in terms of a technique, is that what you started out to do? Tell me how you got to that, to sort of tell just that part of the story.
Yeah, great question. I think it's all about the prism that you use to come at a narrative. And I'm just speaking from, a writer's perspective. And I just really thought that the origin story of Larry Bird is a compelling underdog story and one of the great underdog stories of all time. And, without spoiling the ending for folks, there's something that happens in Indiana after the epic championship game between Bird and Magic in March 1979 that is so implausible, so unlikely, that I just knew that was the angle to come at this story, and that was the way I wanted to tell it from the start.
Let's talk about Larry Bird, the basketball player, because he's known for being a wonderful shooter. But what's interesting is both he and Magic Johnson, I think, saved the league and are better passers and sort of create this new world of passing that I don't think existed before. He was a better passer. How did he learn that? Who taught him that? Was it natural? How was he such a great passer?
Well, I think it's a combination of a couple things. As I mentioned before, up until his senior year of high school, Larry Bird is only 6'2", 6'3". He's effectively a guard. And so his whole life, he's bringing up the ball. And then he has this epic growth spurt. So, he has an ability to see the floor. He retains his agility as a big man, even after that growth spurt. And for all of that, he's able to make those passes, not just in the NBA later, but in college. I mean, I watched every minute. I unearthed for this book every game, the game tape of every game of that epic 1978-79 season. I watched every minute of it. And, Larry is making passes at times as a college player that, they're like unlike anything you'd ever seen. And so, he has, that growth spurt. He has all that experience as a guard. And then I just think it was in him. Larry lived at the court. He liked shooting and playing for the sake of shooting and playing. And because he was out there all the time, he just had a vision for the court that other guys didn't have.
How much fun was it to go back and watch Dick Enberg and Al McGuire in that game?
Incredible. And a young Brian Gumbel. A young Brian Gumbel is the sideline reporter at the 1979 championship game. And you got like 3 Hall of Famers right there. It's amazing.
All right. So when last we left him, he hitchhikes. He leaves Bloomington, hitchhikes back home. Is he thinking he's done? Is he going to make another try at some other school? Where's his head at as he heads back home after failing out of Indiana?
So I don't think you can overstate how close Larry Bird comes to disappearing forever in the winter of 1974-75. He briefly enrolls at a vocational school with 200 students and briefly plays basketball there. Then he drops out from that school, gets a job with the city. He's now paving roads, fixing sidewalks, collecting the trash. And by February 1975, Bird is playing in what was known then as the Industrial League. He's playing basically late night basketball in rural gymnasiums on teams that have been sponsored by bars and liquor stores and construction companies with guys who have day jobs and mortgages and kids. He's gone. No one is writing stories. No one is writing stories about whither Larry Bird or where is Larry Bird. No one cares. The moment he left Indiana, he drifted away to the edges of the basketball map. And it really is only one man who pulls him back from the brink. And that man was named Bill Hodges, a young journeyman down on his luck, assistant coach with Indiana State.
And he somehow convinces Larry Bird, but it's not like Larry Bird's dying to go back into the arena, right? I mean, he has to do some convincing to get Larry Bird back, doesn't he?
He does. So, Bill Hodges is a lot like Larry. He's from rural Indiana, a small little town. Bill Hodges knows what it's like to be poor and overlooked, just like Larry. And, I mentioned, Bill Hodges is down on his luck. In April 1975, Bill Hodges is on his third coaching job in 3 years, moving from school to school to school. His career is not moving in the right direction. But Bill knows Indiana. He has made his career from recruiting in Indiana. That's why he gets the job at Indiana State. And it's Bill's idea to go down to French Lick and go searching for Larry Bird. And, when he finds him, Bill connects with Larry on a personal level. He understands Larry in a way that Bobby Knight never did. And it really is that connection that coaxes Larry back, and convinces him that he should re-enroll in college and go to Indiana State.
The book is called Keith O'Brien. Heartland is the name of the book. Bobby Knight passed away a few years ago, but in your research, what did he say? What was his ultimate comments about Larry Bird not working out and then Larry Bird going on to become one of the greatest players of all time?
Bobby Knight has gotten a lot of criticism over the years for this mistake. I think some of that criticism is deserved. Bobby didn't know Larry. He didn't understand him. He didn't know what he needed, not at all. And when Larry leaves, by the way, in September of 1974, Bobby does give one interview about it at the time. And he says, basically, and I'm quoting here, "We've accepted it. He's gone. He's not running back down to French Lick to get him. We've accepted it." But Knight had actually done a few things right. They placed Bird in a dormitory that is filled with athletes and specifically filled with basketball players. He's rooming with another basketball player who is also, a lot like Larry. He's from a small town like Larry. He's, working class like Larry. He's white like Larry. Even that doesn't work. And so Knight will say later that he just didn't understand what Larry Bird needed.
And in some ways, it sounds like clearly it wasn't a fit for Larry Bird, right? It was too big. It was too many people. It was a shock to the system in a sense. If he would have stayed, would he have become Larry Bird?
Well, there's two schools of thought on that. On the one hand, as I said, Indiana is going to lose one game over the next 2 years. So that's a really great team. Larry liked to win. I think he would have played well with that really great team. I think he would have emerged clearly as a star on that team. And, you in an alternative universe somewhere, maybe the Indiana University goes on and wins 3 out of the next 4 NCAA championships. Who knows? But there is another world. Bobby Knight was notoriously stubborn and didn't like to listen to others. Larry Bird is pretty stubborn and didn't always like to listen to others. There is another world where maybe it doesn't go well at all.
They never cross paths again, right? I mean, Bobby Knight coaches some amateur games along the way, the Olympics, but Larry Bird was never involved with any of those, right? They never cross paths again, correct?
I mean, they cross paths in the way that people cross paths. And I want to be clear, there was no animosity between them. Bird doesn't leave Bloomington because of Bobby Knight or anything that happens in a meaningful way because of Bobby Knight. At that point in the season, in early September, Knight, by NCAA rule, can't even be hanging out at the practices. So they barely interacted at all.
Yeah. Larry Bird gets drafted as a junior by the Celtics.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. I was always curious as to why, if he's broke and down on his luck, why he doesn't leave as a junior and take his money and go. Why does he stick around for his senior year?
So, Larry Bird is drafted in June 1978. He was a junior, as you said. He chooses to come back to Indiana State to play his senior year. And by the way, nobody thought Indiana State was going to be very good in his senior year. So that doesn't even make sense. But here's the thing. One thing that's true about Larry in 1978, and that is still true about him in 2026, is that if he says he's going to do something, or if he says he's not going to do something, he follows through on that. He is a man of his word. And he had told his mother that he was going to graduate. He was going to get a degree. He had also made a pledge to his coaches at Indiana State that he was returning for his senior year. And so in a moment, in a scene that we cannot imagine in 2026, Larry Bird chooses to come back to Indiana State, a team that will not be ranked in any preseason poll that fall, because he has made a promise that he's going to finish his college career.
Wow. And ultimately, before you came on the show, we talking about he signs for 5 years, $3 million, which was a record at the time. I mean, now rookies don't get out of bed for $3 million for 5 years. I mean, give me a break. It's unbelievable the salary.
The best college athletes are being paid $3 million a year. I mean, that's how much it's changed.
You also, Keith O'Brien, sorry, the book Heartland, you also can't underestimate, and it's hard. Part of the greatness of the book is to try and explain to people today how influential that game was 46 some odd years ago, right? I mean, there's a before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, and there's an after Larry Bird in the NCAA tournaments, right? That is the defining line for modern college basketball, is it not?
It is, but I think there's two important things to know. One, Bird and Magic don't create the wave. They're really riding the wave. College sports is growing throughout the 70s. In 1972, 1973, and again in 1975, when Bird and Magic aren't even in college yet. The NCAA championship game is setting television audience records. And so they are just catching the wave at the right time. That's number one. And number two, I think more important and more compelling to me as a storyteller, than the creation of March Madness and that whole narrative, is what that game meant to Bird, to his teammates, to the city of Terre Haute, Indiana, to the state of Indiana itself. It really is shockingly one of those games, one of those seasons where nothing is the same again for the people in that entire locker room. And that was something that I learned in some of my very first interviews for the book that became Heartland. I'm reaching out to guys who played on this team, finding them. And then some of the very first things they told me, once we started talking was, well, that game changed my life, and here's why. And so that to me is just incredibly compelling, that this one moment in time, or to use a March Madness cliche now, that this one shining moment sort of reverberates through the decades, sort of changing everything.
Yeah. Larry Bird still lives in French Lick, right? Still lives a very modest life, does he not?
Not in French Lick, but in rural Indiana. He moved out of West Baden and French Lick many years ago. He lived for a while in Indianapolis when he was head coach and then president of the Pacers. These days, he lives on a rural stretch of land outside of Bloomington, Indiana. That's where he spends at least half of his year. And so, he still is, an Indianan at heart.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Keith O'Brien, the book, New York Times bestselling author of Charlie Hustle and Fly Girls, his newest work. It drops tomorrow, and the book tour begins in earnest, and you're all over Indiana for the next couple of days. Heartland is the book, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. Keith O'Brien, I know it's a busy, busy time for you as the book drops. Thank you for giving us a couple of minutes tonight. Good luck on the book tour, and you're always welcome here. Thanks for checking in.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Keith O'Brien, the author. The book is Heartland, A Forgotten Place, An Impossible Dream, and the Miracle of Larry Bird. America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, it's open phones next hour, and don't look away from the news because news is happening every single moment, it seems like. Oil and natural gas prices have surged as Iran has targeted energy facilities in the Gulf, and the passage of the tankers through the Strait of Hormuz has slowed to a trickle. About 1/5 of the world's oil, it's about 20% of the world's oil, and a significant percentage of the natural gas normally passes through that choke point. And remember, natural gas has been shut off when it comes to Russia because they don't want to take Russia's natural gas. So the natural gas has been coming from the Middle East up to Europe. So if that slows to a trickle, that is a major, major problem going forward. So we can talk about all of that coming up next hour with open phones. To the text line we go. A couple of text comments. Do you follow the NBA? It's a joke right now with all the tanking. I would never pay to see an NBA game. I would if the Knicks are playing. I've been a long-suffering Knicks fan. Here's another one. Frank in College Station, Texas. I hate to keep giving you compliments, bro. You got the best guests on the radio. Happy Texas Independence Day to my fellow native Texans. God bless you. God bless you, Frank. Thanks for checking in. We'll get the text line. We'll get the phones going next hour. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Open phones and open texts next hour. We'll talk about anything and everything, and I suspect Iran. Your thoughts and comments and questions about that all straight ahead. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
All right, welcome back. It's hour number 3, and it's open phones. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. We, of course, topic on everybody's mind and all over the place is the bombing of Iran over the weekend by the United States of America and the retaliation by Iran as of tonight. It's the, fourth day of the campaign. Iran has bombed Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, the militias in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, all the way Cyprus in the Mediterranean. And we'll see how that all shakes out. But this is, as we were talking to our guests earlier and listening to some of the news reports, the United States going after their capabilities, the United States going after their missile capabilities, their launchers. It seems they have an endless supply of launchers, and that we only have a number of interceptors as well as Tomahawk cruise missiles. And you keep reading from credible news sources, not the ones that are anti and not the ones that are pro, but the legitimate news sources saying that there are military officials and military experts who are wondering about the number of Tomahawk cruise missiles and the number of interceptors. And seems to be a bit of a race if we can knock out all of their rocket launchers before we run out of interceptors. But that's one of the topics of conversation. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. I want to throw a couple of things I've been thinking about, and then we can sort of go to the phones. First of all, if anybody thinks they know what the future holds, I truly, honestly believe, and I don't mean any disrespect by this, but you're insane. There's no way to know or to predict what is going to happen. This might be and turn out to be a brilliant move by President Trump. He has taken out a leadership that has been the scourge of society for the last 40 years. They've held the world hostage, right, with their funding of terrorist organizations and Hezbollah and all of that, right, and Hamas and all the others. And they have been a thorn in the side of the United States, poking and prodding. Countless terrorist attacks have been funded and coordinated through Iran, and they've done dastardly and terrible things, so they're gone. That's good. And maybe, right, maybe there just might be a more moderate regime that takes over in Iran and is much more friendly, much more willing to work in the world community and not necessarily a sponsor of jihadists all around the world. That would be a good thing. And that's a possibility. There's also the other possibility that this turns into a nightmare. It turns into a quagmire. It sets off all sorts of chain reactions in which we can't get back to any type of peace for a long time, right? Whether it's the Israelis, whether it's the other Arab nations in the Middle East, if Europe gets drawn into it, right? If you cut off the Strait of Hormuz and we can't reopen it and the ships can't get through and gas prices go through the roof and that causes a trickle effect, and right, you can only imagine. That's also a real possibility. And who knows where this goes. There's one thing, though, that I have to comment on, and then I'll shut up and go to the phones, and that is this idea of regime change. And clearly it's not like Venezuela, because regime change in Venezuela was take the head guy out and put the number 2 in charge. We've already, 40, 50 of their top leaders are now gone. So we have regime change like we had in Venezuela, but that's not good enough. So we're going to keep bombing them till who knows. But they keep talking about we encourage the Iranian people to overthrow the government. And while that sounds like a great idea, when the United States of America overthrow the oppressive British regime of the United States, we had help. The French came and helped us, right? We had other countries helping us in our campaign for guns and ammo and money and everything else, right? Who's coming to the defense of the Iranian people? Are we going to give them military assets? Are we going to give them guns? Are we going to give them logistical support? Are they going to get other type of military hardware from other people? Where and how are the Iranian people supposed to rise up against their government? They had massive protests and got gunned down in the streets. Now, I know you're weakening the government, but who are we going to back? Are we just going to sit there and say, well, right, this is a Game of Thrones and let's just see what happens? Are we going to put our thumb on the scale and say we want these people? Are we not going to give them guns to make, because you can't overthrow a government, right? I mean, the United States needed France to come in and help us overthrow Great Britain. Who's helping the Iranian people? And so they keep talking about, boy, we sure do hope the Iranian people take this opportunity and reclaim their country. Okay, fine. This is not a game of Risk. This is real world. You need intelligence. You need communication. There is no internet, so they have no communication. They have no intelligence. They can't talk to each other. So how are you supposed to do this? Again, is it possible? Absolutely. But it is really, really, really hard. So, look, you hope for the best at this point because this terrible, terrible regime is now off the face of the earth. It's caused so many problems for the last 40 years. But at what cost? And how do we know and who do we know wants to run Iran going forward? And how much of a say are we going to have? Because if we don't do anything, is China going to step in? Is Russia going to step in and put in a government more friendly to Russia? Shouldn't we sort of install our own government? That's good idea and bad idea. So there's all sorts of things here. 314, check that. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. All right, I'll shut up and go to the phones here. We got Peggy in New Franklin, Ohio. Peggy, thanks for joining us on America at Night.
I really appreciate what you just said because I have a lot of trepidations about what is happening. And when they took out, 50 of the leaders of the country, I thought maybe that would be the end of it.
Right.
And then the people could take over and do their own thing. It's their country.
That's what they did in Venezuela, right? They took out the head guy, put the number 2 woman in charge. Now she answers to America. Again, if regime change is the goal, they've reached the goal. So what else is there?
Well, I'm afraid they're going to shoot themselves in the foot because I'm part of it. I'm an American.
Sure.
But the one thing I told your screener, I don't think a lot like other people do. I'm old, and maybe that's part of it. But my heart and my mind, I can't help but think about the families of the 6 American men and maybe women who have died, Plus, Israel's still bombing like crazy. And what about the old, the weak, the sick, the poor? That isn't going to make us look a whole lot better.
Peggy in New Franklin, Ohio, I thank you for your thoughts. If this goes on for 4 or 5 more weeks, what are they going to continue to bomb? What is the point, right? Why is it going to go 4 weeks? When is it going to go 5? Are we going to bomb until somebody else comes in and takes over? And who would that be? Shouldn't we sort of have a say in who we want to take over in some way, shape, or form? Or are we just going to allow the Lord of the Flies to sort of take over and just the biggest strongman wins and hope for the best? I don't know. I don't know. Peggy, thanks. Gil, Jim, and Scott, hold on. We got lots more to get to. America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. The floor is yours. Call or text 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw.
Every time somebody from this administration says they're for regime change and they're hoping that the people and the young people of Iran rise up, this is your moment to rise up and take control of your country. The next question that should be asked of these people is the CIA helping? Is the CIA what's the CIA doing, right? We send the CIA all over the world to topple governments. Are we not sending them to Iran? If regime change is truly the idea of this, I get bombing. I understand that. But is the CIA working? Are we sending in private people? They're contractors. Who's doing the heavy lifting here? Who's helping these students coordinate? Who's helping these students with guns and ammo? And who's supplying them with intelligence and all those things? Because that's how it's always worked in the past. And if you're not going to keep the regime in there with new people like you did in Venezuela, right? In one sense, we've already got regime change. But what type of regime change do you want is the question. Scott in St. Louis, welcome to America at Night. Thanks for calling.
I think all these patriotic MAGAs, they should be enlisting right now, man. We're going to need them over there in Baghdad and.
Well, I don't know if troops are going to Baghdad, and even though President Trump has said he doesn't rule out troops, in a million years I never thought he would bomb Iran. In 1,000,002 years, I never would thought he'd send troops. I can't imagine they'd send troops, but at this point, everything's on the table. Who knows what's going to happen now?
Yeah, well, the troops are already there, and
yeah, but they're not on the ground. They're not.
Well, they're dying.
Well, that's true.
Some of them.
Yes, they're on bases. They're on airplanes. They're on ships and everything else. But they're not boots on the ground in Iran.
Not in Iran, but close enough to where Iran can kill them, and is killing them.
Yes, 6 have passed away so far, and as President Trump said, expect more.
Right. So, we're going to need those MAGAs. They're very patriotic. We need them to enlist right now. Okay.
All right, Scott. Thank you for the phone call. Appreciate it. Jim in Portland. Jim, welcome to America at Night.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Are you there?
I'm here, Jim. Go
hear
ahead.
The click.
Go ahead.
Okay. Earlier, the last couple of days, I think I sent you a text or something. I thought it would have been a good idea during the negotiations, Iran and the United States, to say, you got to bring mass murderers to justice. And it certainly, I thought it would have united the American public. Anyway, tonight, early this afternoon, I went down to Powell's Books at 10th and Burnside on the west side downtown, and On the return side, there's a bunch of protesters. I would imagine between 1 and 200, split the difference, 150. There was like 30-inch strip wide of sidewalk if you're going to catch the return bus. I thought I'll catch it somewhere else in a different line even. But if I would have mentioned, what about, and they were in a mania too. If I would have said, what about the 30,000 dead Iranian civilians, I'd have been like a lit match going into gasoline. It's this mania stuff, when somebody is, when people lose their individuality and they're just part of a group and nothing else. To me, that's pretty scary stuff. It happens in sports too, not just politics. And
well, it also it happens in every political party, in every political movement.
Yeah, it's a part of human nature I don't like. Who talked about that was Eric Hoffer in a book called The True Believer. That'd be an eye-opener again today.
Well, Jim,
as old as I am, 74.
Jim, let me ask you this question. If Joe Biden would have done the same thing as President Trump did, would you have been in support of it?
If he was as capable as Trump, maybe.
No. If Joe Biden would have done the same thing Joe Biden did, which is go after the Irani leadership, would you have been in favor of it?
I suppose so.
Interesting. I suspect that those people protesting would have supported Biden, and the people supporting Donald Trump would be very much opposed to it. The majority, the overwhelming majority of people. No, I truly do.
Wow.
Yeah. I truly do. I mean, do you really think that the Republican establishment would have been in favor of Joe Biden doing something like this?
Probably not. It's a difference, like between a General Patton and a General Custer.
I mean, most of the people in this country pick the party and then agree with whatever that person does, right? Look at MAGA, right? Look at MAGA right now. MAGA's having a civil war over this because many people say MAGA is whatever Donald Trump says it is, and the other half are saying MAGA is America first, and this isn't America first. That's the fight going on within MAGA. I got a break, Jim. Call back, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729, America at Night. Those are the phone lines. Give us a call. Back in a moment.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome back to America at Night. Call now, 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw.
Let's go back to phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America at Night, it's open phones. The hour is yours. What do you want to talk about? A lot of people talking about the bombing in Iran. Obviously, a lot of people have opinions and thoughts, and I've got lots of thoughts and opinions, and the biggest one is I don't know. I'm glad he's gone. I'm hoping this thing works, but it is a huge gamble by President Trump. I mean, hopefully he's able to thread that needle. I think even his biggest detractors, deep down, have to be, if they're honest with themselves, have to be rooting for this to work. Because if it doesn't, that means all sorts of terrible things. It could work. It's got to thread the needle, but it's a huge gamble on President Trump's part. Let's go to Gil in San Antonio. Gil, thanks for joining America at Night.
Yes, let's give the Iranian thing a little time to shake itself out. But
Okay.
That's not why I called. I have a Larry Bird story of the time that I met Larry Bird.
You met Larry Bird. Tell me about that story.
Well, back in 1982, I went and double-checked the date. It was March the 2nd, 1982. No, I'm sorry, March 4th, 1982, the day before my birthday. Two of my Army friends, because I was in the Army then, took me out. And one of them had been in grammar school with Larry Bird, not in French Lick, but in the small town next to it. They were in grammar school together. So we went to the Spurs Celtics game, and we paid the usher to take a note down to the bench. And they said, the usher came back and said, "Come on down. Larry wants to see his old grammar school chum." And we all got to meet Larry Bird and Kevin McHale. Red Auerbach wasn't coaching at that time. It was a guy named Fitch. But that was a great birthday present my friends gave me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, you walked down to the side of the court and said hi to Larry?
Yeah, we just, they were on the bench before the game started. And we got to, shake hands, and we were E5s enlisted in the Army at that time, all three of us, and Larry Bird was most gracious to us.
How about that?
He was that kind of guy.
Yeah, that's a good memory.
Pretentious.
That's a good memory for you to remember Bill Fitch as the coach of the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, well, my birthday's coming up this week, as a matter of fact.
Well, there you go. So all those years ago, I have great amount of respect for Larry Bird, obviously, right? And there's a great story, but a fan I am not, since I'm a long-suffering New York Knicks fan. Not a big fan of the Boston Celtics, and as you can imagine, getting beat by Larry Bird for 15 years surely wasn't a whole lot of fun.
I have one question for you.
Yes.
A baseball question.
Yes.
When I went to the Philippines in 2012, the Houston Astros were in the National League. Now they're in the American League. How did that happen?
It's actually a really good question. One in which involves a somewhat long answer. Do you want to hear the answer? So here it is. It's a great question. In all of the wranglings of the schedules, they ultimately had two teams more in the National League than they had in the American League. And so they had to move one team from the National League, from the American League to the National League team, right? There was more teams in the American League. So they had to move one to make it even on both. So when they had interleague play, everybody could have a team to play, right? If you had an odd number, somebody couldn't play during the interleague play. So they had the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm getting to the Astros here. They had the Milwaukee Brewers. I believe they first asked the Kansas City Royals to move, and the Kansas City Royals said no. Then at the time, the commissioner, Bud Selig, was owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, and he said, "I'll move." So the Brewers moved from the American League to the National League. Then a few years later, they decided to change the schedule again, and they needed a certain amount of teams in a certain amount of leagues, and they needed an extra team in the National League West, I believe. And so they needed a team to move from the National League back to the American League. And so they asked the Houston Astros, and their owner, I believe, Crane, right, had just purchased the team. And I think, if memory serves me correct, part of him buying the team, he had to agree to move the team from the National League to the American League.
Okay.
How's that for an answer?
I know that the National League now uses a designated hitter, so the
Yes.
pitcher doesn't have to hit.
Yes.
Those were such great.
I know.
Obstacles to play under.
I know. First of all, how much credit do I get for pulling that off of the top of my head? That's one.
You get great credit, and someday I'll tell you how I have one degree of separation from Fernando Valenzuela.
Oh my goodness, you are a modern day Forrest Gump, Gil. Thanks for the phone call.
Okay.
Gil's like Forrest Gump. The guy's everywhere. Every time something happens, Gil is standing right next door to the guy. It's unbelievable, this guy. But yeah, I know. I lament I'm not a total purist, but I sure do not like the designated hitter in the National League. I'm addicted. I have to watch it, so I said I was never going to watch baseball again. I caved. I'm watching it. I admit it. I'm guilty as charged. Can't help myself. It is what it is. It's just too ingrained. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have baseball. But yeah, no, not a fan. Not a fan of the designated hitter in the baseball. I am, however, a fan of the pitch clock. I think that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's the greatest thing since pitchers got to hit. I think the pitch clock is fantastic. Go back and look at games in the 70s and the 80s. They were 2.5-hour games. You got in the box and you swung the bat. But I mean, a 3.5-hour game was just ridiculous. So they had to do something. So I applaud them for trying to make changes. And I don't even have that much of a problem with the interleague play. But the designated hitter was, I think, a bridge too far for me. But that's, all that other issues. There was something else I wanted to mention before I was so rudely interrupted myself with my stream of consciousness conversation. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Was it the story I wanted to tell you about Magic Johnson? Or was it the story I wanted to tell you about baseball? I can't remember now. All right, here's what I'll do. I'll regroup and come back. We got open phones, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America Net. Oh, I know what it was. Yeah. I know what it was. Somebody on the text line asked me, why are you quitting caffeine? What is wrong with it? First of all, I mentioned on Friday's show that I was quitting caffeine, and now it's been a good week and 4 or 5 days since I've had caffeine. The doctors told me that you should quit caffeine. I had a little bit of an AFib issue, and the doctor said, you got to cut out caffeine. And so I cold turkey not this last Friday, the Friday before. No, I guess it would have been Monday morning. Yeah, it was a week ago today. A week ago today, I had my last Diet Coke. And I spent all last week withdrawing from caffeine. And I got to tell you, it was not fun and it was not easy. and towards the end of the week, it was like the bear would not let me out. And I had to pop a couple Tylenol to get through the last 2 days of the week because, man, it was headaches. Man, they started at my nose and went straight up. And I had night shakes and night sweats and irritable and just aches and pains. I couldn't believe how miserable I was because of the caffeine. Now, it's interesting. I didn't crave the caffeine, but the withdrawal symptoms were terrible. And it's hard to explain, but I used to smoke, I don't know, the last cigarette, I'll tell you exactly last time I had the cigarette was December 15th of 2005 might have been the last cigarette I had, which is 21 years ago. So quitting smoking was different because you I don't know. I don't know if I craved the cigarette. I didn't crave the caffeine. I just had the withdrawal symptoms, if that makes any sense. I didn't like crave the Diet Coke, but I craved the cigarette. So it was harder to quit smoking in a sense. But the withdrawal from caffeine was brutal, man. I would not recommend that on anybody. So that's the reason why I'm quitting caffeine. The doctors told me, not that I always listen to the doctors, but yeah. By the way, I also went to the doctors today, and they gave me a. They said I needed my shingles vaccine, and I was like, hey, you know what? I love vaccines. Give me as many vaccines as humanly possible, because I love me some vaccines. So there you go. So that's why I'm quitting caffeine. All right, now, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America at Night. More texts, more phone calls. Stay right there. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Miss a portion of tonight's show? Not a problem. Go to americaatnightlive.com to find a replay of every show. Text line is open. Send us a message at 844-2-McGraw. That's 844-262-4729.
All right, I'll leave you with this. And that is one of the biggest criticisms of the Democrats that I agreed with over the years was when they would say things like, the Democrats were criticized for cutting and running, right? Not staying to finish the job, or why are we going to signal what we're going to do, right? You have to leave by January 1st or else, right? And the Democrats would be criticized and saying, hey, you're signaling to the bad guys that, all they have to do is wait until January 1st, and then if you're pulling out January 1st, right? So that was the, and I thought that was valid criticism, right? It never signaled to the opposition what your plans are, right? And I always wondered why Democrats always fell into that trap of sort of showing their hand, cutting and running, right? Because if your enemy doesn't have the resolve to finish the job, then all you have to do is wait them out, right? And that always thought was a valid criticism of the Democrats. The Republicans are dangerously close to saying the same thing, right? Pete Hegseth today, the Secretary of Defense, in his news conference said, look, this is not an endless war. This is not Iraq. J.D. Vance says in the Washington Post, whatever day it was, there is no chance that this military action would result in years-long conflict. Right? They're coming dangerously close to signaling and the MAGA movement saying, all right, fine, get in, get out, fine. Okay, hold on a second here. If you're Iran, look at this from Iran's point of view. What is Iran seeing? Iran is seeing Donald Trump's base sort of splintering apart. And if it looks like the American public are not behind this, the enemy's paying attention to this. And all the enemy has to do is just not necessarily win, just have enough to continue to a death by 1,000 cuts, right? Couple of soldiers over here, a couple of bases over there, a couple more soldiers over here. Every once in a while, you might get, quote unquote, lucky and, get somebody where you get 10, 12, 14, 20 people. And all of a sudden, right, then Trump says, well, we got to send this. We got to send more troops in, right? Could you imagine in 3 or 4 or 5 weeks if he says the job's not done, we got to go send in more troops? Or 3, 4, 5 weeks, the job is done. When is the job done? What is the job? And what type of what, right? And so they're coming dangerously close to giving the opposition the roadmap that says all you have to do is you don't have to give up. You don't even have to win. You can have as many people killed just as long as you have some capability to inflict some type of pain on the enemy, a la Vietnam, right? They could never win. They just caused enough trouble that back at home lost interest, right? They lost the support of the American people. And that's why when people talk about Donald Trump having to sell this to the American people, you need a united front. That's what happened with the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, right? And finally, people were like, what is going on? Why are we still doing this? What is our goal? Our goal was to regime change. Well, the regime left. We'd set up a new regime. They didn't want it. They right? It was very, very difficult. And so I just think every time they say this is not going to be long, they're sort of signaling we don't have the intestinal fortitude to finish it off. So we're not going to be here long term, which again is sending a message to Iran and their leaders that all we have to do is just continue some type of offensive engagement, and they'll tire of it. So it's a danger. Again, I'm rooting. No one's a bigger supporter or rooting for this more than I am, for all sorts of reasons. But again, he's got to thread the needle in a way which is going to be very, very difficult to do. The easy part's done, right? Getting rid of the bad guys. That's the easy part. The hard part is what comes next. And we'll be covering it here throughout the next couple of weeks. Try and get the best guests, most insightful conversation, and of course, phone calls and text messages for you guys to chime in as well. That's going to do it for us. Don't forget, podcasts. The show gets turned into podcasts where all fine podcasts are found. You can download and listen to any and all. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-2. Well, you know that. I'm done. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow night on Westwood One.